You are listening to the Jag Bros podcast. We are three brothers. I am Jack, along with my older brother JT and younger brother Joey. And we always say it, diehard Jaguars fans in the highs and lows. And the Jaguars have hit all new lows. In fact, we're recording this on Wednesday because we've just been sitting here waiting Sunday evening, waiting Monday evening, waiting Tuesday, waiting now middle of the day Wednesday, and nothing has happened after the worst loss in Jacksonville Jaguars history. I have a whole range of emotions that I've gone through in these past 3 days, but I'm curious where y'all are at. Where y'all at even with the Jaguars? Is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it giving up? Where are y'all at with the Jags right now?
I would say, successfully gone through all the stages of grief, and I am at the point of apathy. In fact, I did not watch most of that game. I just followed it on my phone, and I felt nothing after the Jaguars suffered that worst loss in history. It's clear that Shad and the rest of the organization does not care about winning, does not care about the performance on the field. So why should I care about it?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. It's obvious Doug wants to be fired. He's not fighting for his job at all. He could care less up at these press conferences. Like, why are we putting that type of product out there? It's your bye week. It doesn't quite matter, but if you just fire someone, that would bring energy back to this team that has, as you could see last game, no energy. If you do nothing, then you accept the performance instead of making anyone be fired and show accountability, and maybe they wake up a little bit. But it's just disgusting how we see that type of performance. We see that kind of, I don't care, the team doesn't care, I'm not going to fire anyone. It's nuts.
It's just weird. Like, the expectation was, in fact, Ian Rappaport of NFL leaks out, Saturday evening, hey, if the Jaguars don't play well on Sunday, there's going to be changes. And he mentions everywhere from head coach to general manager to coordinators. And here's my big question. Obviously this weekend we also had that big fight, or quote unquote big fight, with Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. And my question is, like, who threw that weekend more? Was it Mike Tyson clearly throwing that fight to win $20 million? Or was it the Jacksonville Jaguars players throwing that game to try and get their coaches or someone fired? Because it looked like, JT, you saved a lot of time, and I'm glad you did. But watching that game, it looked like the Jaguars, anytime they could get a first down on offense, was like scoring a touchdown, versus the Lions were scoring touchdowns easier than we could get a first down. I mean, it looked like a JV high school team against an NFL team. And yet, again, we're 72 hours later, 72 hours after the biggest Detroit Lions win in franchise history and the largest loss in Jaguars history, and Shad Khan has done nothing.
The players are begging for him to be fired. Joey, you're right. He is begging for himself to be fired. He's not having a good time. He's miserable. He wants this to be over as soon as possible, and we're refusing to put him and the rest of the team out of their misery at this point. And look, it's not like anybody, all the other teams are making moves.
Yep.
You've already seen New Orleans fire their coach. You've seen the Jets fire their head coach, fire their GM. You've seen other teams fire the coordinators, fire the head coaches as well. And yet here we are sitting there. The only way you could spin it and say this is quote unquote strategic is if you're saying, hey, let's just tank. Let's lose the rest of our games. We're already first overall pick. There's more value to that having. And I can buy that to a certain extent, except for the fact that you have a losing culture, a losing roster, a losing mentality seeping through every part of that organization. That's not something that just radically gets changed going into 2025. And so at this point, I would rather us win a couple of games, show that we're fighting moving forward, and end up with a 4th or 5th overall pick than do what we're doing and just full tank, because it just feels like that's just going to be who we are.
100%, because we're not even tanking for, and I like Travis Hunter, and we've talked about Travis Hunter, and I'll just pause here too, because fans are obviously going to be curious, if we do make moves, and maybe you're listening to this and the Jags finally have made moves. Our last episode, we go into super detail of all of our favorite coaches, coordinator options, GMs, but we felt like we had to push pause on the rebuild because this was so bad. And I think the best thing I've seen this week was put out by Big Cat Country. The title of the article is Shad Khan, C-O-N, like con man. The NFL's worst owner is destroying the Jaguars. And here were his main points. Number one, no accountability, no leadership. Shad Khan has the worst record in NFL history as an owner with more than 100 games, with barely over a 30% win percentage. Number two, he says Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke are clearly the wrong leaders. Like, even they know it. Joey, you're like, yeah, Doug is trying to get fired. He's ready to be done, and yet we still won't do it. Number three, wasting Trevor Lawrence. The Trevor Lawrence question is over. Clearly, without Trevor Lawrence, this team is a disaster. I mean, maybe he should be in the MVP conversation for how bad this team is without Trevor Lawrence. Number four, JT, you nailed this. This is the reputation problem. At this point now, like, the Jaguars have just become even more so of a joke, even more irrelevant, even more like, hey, should the NFL just kick us out of the league? And so I thought that was really well done. He says what needs to happen, and it's just obvious moves. Number one, clean house. Number two, address the fans, right? Nothing has been said to the fans in the past 72 hours. And then number three is cut out all these other distractions and focus on the team and find someone who can build, who knows ball and who can build a great team.
Well, I wonder if Shad Khan is actually punishing Doug by keeping his job and being like, you made this mess, you're going to finish it. What? So we fire him, put an interim coach, and then we still are going to like lose, but we'll be happier.
It's momentum. It's trajectory.
I know.
And you get a head start on the new search.
But the issue is by you doing that, you alienate your fans who are crying for him to be fired. You got to get rid of him. He wants to be gone. It's just going to leave a bad stain on Jacksonville if you're leaving someone who doesn't want to be there as the coach. The fans don't want him. And then that's just going to carry over. Even when you get a new person, you're going to be like, well, what happens if he sucks? Then we're going to have to deal with this all over again. Like, it just puts a bad taste in your mouth, and then you get hurt.
I'm so glad the rest of the Jaguar media right now is starting to focus on this. I have been saying this for months. I've been saying this for a long time. Shad Khan is a problem for all of the reasons that they just listened out. And here's the thing. Shad Khan is a brilliant businessman. What he's done with the Jaguars from a business perspective, he bought this for just under $600 million, and it's now worth $4.6 billion. That's almost a 7x return on investment. If you actually ask him last year, which most Jaguar fans would say was radically disappointing compared to our expectations and the trajectory of what we did in 2022, Shad Khan could look at this and say it's a great win. Our revenues were up 15%. We had a lot of positive momentum, and the thing is, I would not be surprised if 2024 is maybe the biggest business win ever for Jaguars, because here you have the stadium still full because it's 60% away fans that get to have a free weekend, guaranteed your team win, and enjoy the Florida beaches in October, November, and December. So you're not really losing any money on the ticket revenue, which is only a fraction of the overall expenses that you do. You're doing those two games in London, and you just got the city of Jacksonville to front the bill of the $1 billion upgrade that you want to do to the stadium. And so from his perspective, strictly business, 2024 may be the best business year for the Jaguars ever. And so he just doesn't care. And if you look at what he's done in Jacksonville, he also owns a Premier League team called Fulham FC. He bought them in 2013, so a couple years after he bought the Jaguars. Guess what they have done since he has taken over? From a market value perspective, they're also up 6 or 7x. But from a performance perspective, they've literally never done worse. In fact, the previous 12 seasons, they were in the Premier League, and they were roughly 10 to 12th. Most of those times, averaging about 50 points per season. So for soccer, you have, I think it's 3 points for a victory and 1 point for a tie. So averaging about 50 points per victory, somewhere around 10th or 12th in the Premier League, which is the best league in soccer. Soccer, you actually can get relegated if you don't perform well. What do they do the first year Shad Khan takes? They get relegated year one under Khan, having their worst season in over 20 years. They then play the next 6 out of the next 11 seasons in the Champions League. They almost in 2016, they were almost so bad they almost got relegated out of that league too, to a league even underneath them. So and even the 5 seasons that they've been in the Premier League due to promotions back to where they should have been, they're still performing about 15 points less per season than what they did prior to Shad Khan. It's not just the Jaguars. It's how he runs. He does not care about the performance on the field. He cares about it from a business perspective.
That was a lot of soccer, to be honest. But I get everyone's point, and I get the frustration. I will say, and some people have tweeted this out too, like, I am grateful that he's kept the Jaguars in Jacksonville. Like, that's obviously,
sure, yes.
That's important to say, because you think about, again, and we're lifelong Jags fans. Like, I remember that time period so well, where it was always like, oh, the Jaguars are going to London, or the Jaguars are the next team to leave their city. So I'm grateful for that. And the frustrating part is it's so easy in one sense to be able to fix this problem. Just bring in a president of football operations and just give him total control, which obviously Shad Khan is already very hands-off anyways. You just have to find the right guy to come in and be president of football operations. Heck, I'm a big diehard Orlando Magic fan, and this is what they did 6-7 years ago in the dumpster fire that they were once Dwight Howard fired their coach and left the team, the worst team in the NBA. Well, what do? They come in and bring Jeff Weltman and Hammond in to come be the VP of basketball operations and GM, and all of a sudden the Magic have one of the youngest teams. They're third place in the East. They took the Cavs to 7 games last year in the playoffs. Why? Because they have someone making decisions who knows ball. The Jaguars don't have a decision, like a true decision maker in the ultimate decision making, whether it's Tony Khan or Shad Khan. Like, they just clearly don't know ball because they're not making the right decisions, where now at this point, everyone in the NFL is like, what are the Jaguars even doing? Why are they not firing a head coach? Why are they not firing a GM who's about to make NFL history with 3 first overall picks in the last 5 years? Everyone is just like, what in the world are the Jaguars doing? Because everyone who knows ball is saying they always make the wrong decisions.
I think the fans, as we got to step up and say we're done with this. I know that we are happy to have them in Jacksonville, but I also don't want to be like, oh, I'm still going to like put up with this absolute terror of a product that you're putting out on the field. Like, we have to just not go to the game and not watch the game. And that's the only way, as you say, Shad Khan may actually do something, is because it hurts his bottom line. We're not going to be there. But it doesn't
work.
We're not.
It doesn't work. Because the stadium now, so in the past, in 2012, 2013, those horrible teams with Mike Mularkey, also under Khan, by the way, during those years, it was still probably 70% Jags fans, 30% away fans. We were season ticket holders around that time, so we know. Now it's 65 to 70% away fans. The stadium's still full with away fans. The Jaguar fans have revolted, Joey. The Jaguar fans refuse to go. It's just the fact that they're so bad, and Jacksonville is such a desirable place to come that fans want to come to go cheer on the Packers and the Steelers and the 49ers and whoever else is coming to play in Florida.
I will say that the good thing is we have 2 terrible home games coming up in December, where we play home against the Jets, home against the Titans. And so I don't see too many Jets or Titans fans. I mean, those could be very, very, very empty games with 2 other franchises in just free will. I'll say too, not obviously the fans, I agree, Joey, we need to do our part. And I think we have, in the sense of making our voices heard, making our frustrations. I mean, all 3 of us were calling for significant changes at the end of the 2023 collapse. And all we do was throw it on Mike Caldwell. And Joey, you called this out probably a couple episodes ago, where Caldwell saying, hey, I'm just saying it now, y'all fired the wrong people. And he looks like a genius, because clearly they did. The Jaguars are in last. They're 3-14 in the last 17 games. Haven't won against a winning team in the NFL in over 365 days. My other hope is, and I think this could be happening, and my hot take, I'm not saying Trevor Lawrence is not legitimately injured, but I think he is milking this shoulder injury for as long as possible until change happens. Because you're talking about a guy in Trevor Lawrence who played through 4 or 5 significant injuries last year. You're talking about a guy who's missed almost no starts, and now he has an injury on his non-throwing shoulder, and he's missing game after game after game. I think a huge part of that is he is fed up. And clearly the product since he's been gone is showing how much of the offense Trevor has been carrying. And so I think at some point that's going to translate into something happening in Jacksonville.
I think that's spot on. I don't know if he's being told by the somebody within the organization to not play, because I do think there's the fact they haven't fired Doug or anybody tells me they are trying to play for the number 1 overall pick. That's my read through it.
Why?
I think
You're not going.
Why? There's not that great of a class. Like, if you get the number 1 pick, the best thing to do most likely is trade back.
it. Exactly.
Yes. But I'm not saying I would agree with the strategy, but like it's at least understandable. Otherwise, it just nothing makes sense. Otherwise, like there's zero other explanation in my mind to do this. And you guys are in Dallas. You guys are Cowboys, surrounded by Cowboys fan. Jack, your wife's a big Cowboys fan. The Cowboys fans for years have been so frustrated with Jerry Jones because he's been so hands-on with every football decision and is elected himself the GM. And I think they would all appreciate him putting somebody else in charge. We have the exact opposite of that right now. We have somebody so removed from football that he just doesn't care because the performance on the field really does not change terribly much what the bottom line is. And so he'd rather focus on strategic business decisions that improve the bottom line, regardless of what the performance is on the field.
Here's what I just do not understand. I know I keep saying that, but I just don't get it, because I agree with you 1,000%, JT. Clearly this week has made it crystal clear that his only care is, am I making money? And at this point, you're right. The Jaguars are still making money. I think if, of course, things don't change eventually, that revenue is not going to keep up at the same level for a lot of reasons. You're not going to have jersey sales. You're not going to have merchandise sales. Eventually, your ticket sales will start to hurt. TV deals, all of that sort of things will start to deteriorate if something doesn't turn around. But what I don't understand is, how are you not legitimately embarrassed by the quote of the year that's gone all around Jacksonville Circle, gone all around the NFL, which is Shad Khan at the beginning of the season saying this is the most talented Jaguars team ever in franchise history. And we're getting blown out in losses we've never done. Even at the worst of the Jaguars, we've never lost 52-6. And we're in last place, and we're about to make NFL history again for being the worst team in the NFL 3 out of the last 5 years. How are you not even like a little bit embarrassed by that quote being plastered all over social media? You know, they're bringing up in Doug's press conference on Monday, like, hey, did you say that we're going to be the best team in Jacksonville Jaguars history? And Doug just laughs and is like, no, I wouldn't. Like, essentially, I would never say something as dumb as that. And yet it seems like he's just not even embarrassed, not even fazed by that.
What's also so crazy is you say Shad Khan's this great businessman. He just went and spent $250 million on this quarterback. And I'm hearing Trevor won't play for Doug pretty much until he's fired. He won't come back because Doug is out there constantly blaming Trevor when Trevor's the only thing keeping this team somewhat tolerable to watch. You see what happens when Mac Jones is not the worst quarterback. We've seen he is comparable sometimes, but on this team, you see how terrible it is if you have just an even average quarterback leading this thing. Trevor is far and beyond much better than average and leads this team where they can still sometimes score like 27 points. And that's not because of Doug or press or any of the playbooks or anything. That's because Trevor plays above them and is able to still bring something. Your $250 million quarterback won't play and you leave that coach in. You're wasting money. Get rid of this cancer. And then even if you go, let's say we go and win against the Colts and we sweep the Titans, then you don't feel so bad. You may not have the number 1 pick overall, but you'll still have a good pick. You'll be like, well, we own the Titans, we own the Colts, even when we're piss poor. All we have to do is now beat Houston Texans and we can still bring this franchise back. But it's like, no, let's hit even further rock bottom and just absolutely start from square zero again instead of cutting off the limb and then saving the rest of the organization.
There's an article a few months ago that talked about how the smartest teams in the NFL right now are essentially using an insurance loophole, that they're insuring their players, especially their most expensive ones. So if they do go on injury, they can file it as an insurance claim to cover the cost of the salary versus what they would actually be paying for. So your point is actually kind of mute. And the dirty little secret is every time Campbell, every time Trevor, all these guys are sitting out, there's actually a decent chance that Khan's not even paying for that. The insurance company is. And so it's not actually costing Khan any money at all to do those things. I don't know if the Jaguars are doing that. I don't 100% know how all that works. It was an article, very, very thought-provoking. I think it was published by ESPN and a couple other places 2 or 3 months ago. But it's not costing him anything. And then your point about ticket sales and all those other things, those are fractions of the actual revenue for Jacksonville. Ticket sales make up about 10% of the revenue for Jaguars on an annual basis. And my point is most of those at this point is away fans. So even if that goes down slightly, it's not really moving the bottom line because the majority of the revenue comes from the NFL shared profiting. And so whether you're good or bad, you're making the same kind of chunk, if you will. And the only little bit of extras are on the margins. So I just don't think it's costing him anything from a financial perspective, even if Trevor doesn't play.
Not yet, but again, it will. And I could easily be shocked. I mean, I'm beyond shocked that the Jaguars have not made a move. But I mean, if you go get blown out these next 5-6 games against bad teams and finish with 2 wins and last place, you feel like surely that is going to be enough to make Shad Khan clean house, but maybe not at this point. But on business wise, Joey, I think you bring up a great point of yes, 2024 is going to be fine. You're technically not paying Trevor Lawrence yet, but the reality is you have to keep revenues going up higher at a very, very fast pace because contracts are going up at a very, very fast pace. So eventually, if all these other things are hurting and are all facing a significant headwind, like in the future, you're going to have serious business ramifications, serious financial problems if the Jaguars can't get fans behind the team. The reality is, whether he likes it or not, the same for Jerry Jones. I mean, you have to have the fan support and approval. And everyone can bash the Cowboys into oblivion, but like the reality is the last 3 years, they've been 12-5 each of those seasons. And the Cowboys are going to make a significant move after having their first bad year, where the Jaguars just string along bad year, collapse after collapse, and don't make moves at all. And so the only other good news for me is it's going to be so bad that surely Trent Baalke is going to be gone. I know y'all keep thinking, he's got a good shot at coming back, but I mean, if we don't fire Doug and the players keep quitting and we keep getting blown out by bad teams, 30, 40, 50 points, you're not bringing back Baalke next year either.
Well, I mean, I'm just refreshing X and social media constantly. It has to come. Like, I don't know why it's taking so long, but I refuse to believe that Doug is going to coach another game. Who knows? There are rumors that Bill Belichick could be a possibility. There's a link between him and Trent Baalke, but I think that link's pretty weak. Something about they used to know each other or they like each other, but I don't think there's any way that Trent Baalke is staying or Doug. Like, it's going to be a complete clean house. I'm hoping that it's an interim coach and then we go get someone really good. We can't start coach looking until we fire someone. So I don't know why we don't do it sooner than later.
We should have had great interviews right after the Lions game. Just grab Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. I mean, these are the 2 hot names in all of NFL for future head coaches. And I mean, why are we not getting a head start on this? But yeah, we talked more in detail on Belichick last episode, but all 3 of us said no. I mean, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. He's not the solution, certainly not the long-term solution. All of us are bending more towards we need an offensive mind to fix what should be a very, very talented Jags offense and is sitting the bottom 5 of pretty much every category in the NFL.
So back in the day, Jeremy Foley was the athletic director at the University of Florida. Florida had Ron Zook. Ron Zook was not meeting the Gators' expectations. And really, one of the first ever coaches that was fired midseason around 2003 was Zook. And the media was asking Foley at the time, hey, why did you decide to do this? And he gave such a great quote. He said, what must be done eventually should be done immediately.
Yep.
And that is such a that is the standard of excellence. That is the standard of winning. That is the standard of all of these other championship level standard, if you will, that our team has so refused to do. And to your point, Joey, you can't see any scenario that Doug is coaching. If Doug was going to be fired before the next game, he would have done so already. They're not firing him over Thanksgiving. This is the practice bye week. You're already going to have a disjointed one with Thanksgiving. You don't fire somebody on a Wednesday or even next Monday going into the game. That would make even less sense. So Doug's going to be the coach. Doug is going to Press Taylor will probably be on the sidelines. Everybody will be there for the next game. I don't even know who it is the week after the bye. And so
Texans at home.
There you go. The Texans at home.
I will say, JT, you put in our group message, this was an iconic line. When you're talking about, well, it wouldn't make sense to do it next week. The Jaguars are king of making moves that don't make sense.
That's true. Yeah.
It wouldn't make sense to wait, but also we're the Jaguars. Why would it make sense?
The fact that Ian Rappaport is so rarely wrong. And so you're making all these national media guys that are usually so right for obvious reasons, because it usually plays out the way that you would think. I think the betting odds early on had Doug Peterson easily the first coach fired. You've already seen multiple head coaches fired at this point, multiple GMs fired, at least one GM fired now, multiple coordinators fired. And yet we still have our whole staff Panthers fans are so frustrated with David Tepper and his overreaching and the decisions. To think that you had CMC, to think that you had Moore, to think that you traded and Burns, and to think that you traded so much to get a quarterback who's not even going to be in the NFL in 2 years in Bryce Young and being a complete whiff, when every other quarterback that draft is looking awesome. And even if you didn't trade up and just kept somebody else, they're in a dark spot for how much that they've given up and the frustrations of the owner. But the Jaguars are right there with them. The 13 cent, cents that it cost to enter a Panthers game last year. I wouldn't say we're right
there with them because they don't have a talented roster. We at least have a talented roster. It's just so mismanaged and not run right.
No, we don't have
We have talented pieces. We have talented pieces. I don't know.
CTJ, you still have Tank and Travis Etienne. You still have Evan Ingram. There are so many talented pieces. This season could have been so different, as you could see, if we just had a better coach and could win close games. We would be in the playoffs. But no,
playoffs?
A terrible coach that can't win any close games. If it's even close, we will find a way to lose. That's on coaching, not players. That is just how frustrating. That's why this is frustrating. If it was like old Jaguars where we had a terrible roster and it didn't matter who we play, we're going to lose because we were the worst team. Whereas we are not the worst team. We are just the worst coach team.
I don't know. I mean,
Amen there.
It is an interesting, and we'll save this for another day, but it would be an interesting debate because there are a lot of teams in a dumpster fire situation in the NFL. You have the Jets who've cleaned house, who are in this weird situation of, are you still rolling with Aaron Rodgers at 41 years old? You went all in with him and you're bad. You have, of course, the Panthers, which we just talked about. We have the Giants benching Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones having way more starts than any quarterback that bad should have ever had. And he's now the third stringer, and they're a hot mess. In Jacksonville, the sad thing is, I agree with you on one level. The Jacksonville Jaguars should be an attractive offer to a GM, to a head coach. I mean, you have the quarterback, you have some other great pieces, you have a young wide receiver one, you have two very good young edge rushers. under contract. You are in a state that doesn't have an income tax. You have an owner that, yes, keeps making the wrong decisions, but like he will give you clearly a very, very long leeway, will give you plenty of space to make whatever decisions you want. Like it should be an attractive offer on all those fronts. And it's just not, because of how much this culture has become a losing, sorry culture under Khan, under Peterson, under Balky, under all of them deserve a ton of blame.
Agreed. So the only fortunate thing for us Jaguars fans looking forward is we will not be disappointed this Sunday because the Jaguars do not, in fact, play on Sunday. With the Jaguars taking a week off, the Jag Bros will also be taking a week off as we go into Thanksgiving. Enjoy the time with your families. Enjoy the fact that you do not have to worry about another Jaguars loss going into the following week. We plan on not recording unless there is some breaking news. Jack, you said this offline. We did get one additional 5-star review, so we appreciate our fans for continuing to support us. Continue to leave us 5-star reviews and comments. If you gave us comments, we certainly will read them in order to help the algorithm. I doubt we have too many more fans right now listening, as I think most people, myself included, are growing more and more apathetic to the Jaguars. But we'll end this podcast like we've done most of the season. Boo ball.